Hi, I'm Riley Moynes, author of The 4 Phases of Retirement and its sequel, The 10 Lessons. We're speaking with people who are squeezing all the juice out of their retirement, people with widely divergent backgrounds, experience, and expertise, people with stories that can inspire and encourage you too to squeeze all the juice out of your retirement. Thanks for joining us for today's conversation. Here we go. Today's guest is Allan Alls. Allan spent over 35 years as an Air Canada pilot and then spent about 10 years in real estate, and most recently, since 2014, has been the mayor of Erin, Ontario. Allan, thank you for joining us this morning. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Good. Let's start with some background. Our focus is on your post-working career, but I know that there are some things that were going on before you retired that have influenced your retirement. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things in your background that are still significant to you today.
Well, I was raised mainly in Cobourg, on a farm north of Cobourg, Ontario. And my father died when I was 11 years old, but he and I worked together a lot in the earlier years, because in those days, as a 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old boy, you worked on the farm. You had to work. And my father was a very hardworking man, and over my life, even my own kids say that, my youngest daughter said, my dad works all the time. So, I like work. I'm most fulfilled when I'm working. And my father was an example of that. And I also had a teacher once who said to me that, you can be whatever you want to be. And I used to kid her that I wanted to be the Prime Minister of Canada. And she said, you could be that if you work for it. Mm-hmm. So that did sort of give me a bit of a background in my life. And there was no money when I finished high school to go to university. My father had died, as I explained, when I was 11. And my mother raised 4 of us at home on $65 a month mother's allowance, which was the only social program available in those days. So I joined the Air Force and loved it. I learned to fly. I flew fighters in the Air Force, CF-100s. They taught me a lot about leadership, about working together, about the whole aspect of being loyal and what Canada means and all the rest of it. And I'm a very pro-Canadian, or very much want Canada to succeed in the world, and it all came from that Air Force background to some degree. Had some great examples of leaders there. I flew with a lot of chaps who had just finished the war in the early 60s. They were still in the Air Force. They'd gone through the Battle of Britain. One guy who was a good example for me did 2 tours of the Battle of Britain. Wow. And it was really interesting listening to him. And I didn't know it at the time, but most of these guys had PTSD. They drank, they smoked, and they killed themselves through health, over the years. But none of us really recognized what was going on in their lives.
Right.
So when I was finished the military, I joined Air Canada because I saw that, not being a university graduate and not being RMC, that I had very limited promotional opportunities in the military. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I worked with a group captain at St. Hubert's in Montreal, said to me that if you aren't that, you best out of the airline, because he said you can go places that you won't get here, or best out of the Air Force, sorry. Anyway, I joined Air Canada and had a wonderful career there, 38 years at Air Canada altogether. The last few years I was in management, started as a check pilot and eventually became manager of the 767 operation, and then director of flights, or chief pilot of flight standards, and then director of flight standards, and I retired as the chief safety officer at Air Canada. I stayed on about a year and a half after I couldn't fly anymore, because you had to quit flying at 60. Right. And I stayed on for a little bit longer, because the chap I worked for was the chief executive officer at Air Canada, and he wanted me to bring in a program called Safety Management Systems, so hence I stayed on. One of the significant parts about my airline career were a lot of things that I remember that are very important to me. I remember the first time I landed a 747, and when you pulled the nose back, the end of the runway disappeared because you're about 90 feet in the air, and that was exciting. I had a great chance, I did all the acceptance flights on our new 767-300s at Boeing. So when you go down there, Boeing is a pilot company. They think the world of pilots. And all the time I was there, we did test flights, and you get to fly the airplane in situations that you'd never want to see the passengers on board. So I enjoyed it. That was good. It was a good part of my airline career.
You had a September 11th experience, didn't you?
Yes, I actually was on the Atlantic. I just crossed the coast of Ireland when I got a message from Flight Dispatch at the time, and they said they reported to me as the director of standards at the time, and they said, Al, there's an airplane run into the World Trade Center. And I turned to my first officer and I said, I'm some idiot in a 150 flying around the fog or something. And it's the way I thought about it.
Right.
And then we got another message and said, no, there's another airplane run into the World Trade Center. And I said, no, this is serious. There's something going on here that I'm not aware of. And so it wasn't too much longer. I got a message from Flight Dispatch, and they said, you haven't locked the flight deck door. You should do so now. And in those days, you could kick the door down. I mean, it wasn't very strong. Right. So I had the in-charge put a cart across the door, a food cart or a beverage cart, and I loosened my fire axe because anybody going through that door that wasn't authorized was going to have it buried in their head, because I knew by then we knew what was going on.
Right.
And at 28 degrees west, I can still see it in my eyes today. I got a message, landed near suitable. There was and on the ocean, there is no direct air traffic control. You're not under radar or anything. So we're 1,000 feet separation, and because of GPS, we're all on the line of stern or 1,000 feet apart. And so I said to the first officer, I heard everybody going to Gander, and I said, I've been to Gander. We're not going to Gander. There's nothing there, and they won't but look after all our people and all that stuff. So I said, we're going back to Shannon, Ireland. So I climbed up 500 feet, which gave us separation, turned around, went back, and Delta Airlines was right behind me. And they said, Air Canada, where are you going? And I said, well, have you talked to your flight dispatch? And they said, no. And I said, well, I suggest you do so. Because the message we'd got, if you go into any American airspace, you'll be shot down.
Wow.
So we didn't, it was serious. We went back. I didn't tell the people it was Air Canada's one of our premier flights, 857. And we had full load. A lot of them were Middle East, Far East passengers, because they connected with the flights out of the Far East.
Right.
And I didn't say anything much other than just saying that the airspace has been closed. We have to go back to Ireland. Landed there, and then when we landed, I explained roughly what had gone on. And as the people were exiting the airplane, all they could say was, thank you, Captain, thank you, Captain. They understood the severity of it all.
Sure.
So we were there for about 3 days. It was a tough time for some of the people because it was a height of touricism in Ireland, and we couldn't get accommodation the first night for everybody. They stayed in the terminal building.
Right.
But I did get the crew and all our business class passengers to a hotel, and then from there, I think it was at least 3 days before we got back. We were able to fly back to Canada. So it was certainly a change in my trip.
Now, you were forced to retire at age 60.
That's true. When you're hired on by Air Canada, you're signed. You know that at 60, right, your flying days are over with. Mm-hmm. During my career at Air Canada, I also was initially very involved with the Pilots Association. I was a local chairman in Toronto of the council, and then later on became first vice president of the National Association, the Canadian Airline Pilots Association. And I did bargaining for the pilots at one stage, so I knew that was inevitable. And I came back from I took my wife with me on my last flight to Rome, and we had a lovely evening there. Went out to dinner with the crew and all that sort of thing. And when we got back, I had a message from the manager at the airport, and he said, I can't get your wife on tomorrow morning, Captain, because we're oversold. I'm sending business class passengers up to Frankfurt to get them home. And my wife was never traveled alone. She's a very nervous traveler, and right, she started crying. So anyway, we did get her on a flight to Heathrow, where I knew she could get out. Mm-hmm. And I remember coming back on that flight was, you're nostalgic, that you're not going to do this again. Right. And when I landed on the left runway in Toronto, the east-west runway, I touched down, and I actually cried because I knew I'm never going to do this again. Right. And this is the end of a big stage in my life.
Sure.
And when you're a captain with the airline, and I don't mean this in a way that would be elitist or anything, but the airline you're at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
The whole business of the airline is to make sure you do your job and you do it safely and well.
Right.
And you're God, to some degree.
Sure.
Some guys carried that too far. I never did. I love flying. I love the flying with the guys that I did. It's such an honest profession because you sit down on the flight deck with me and I can tell you in very short order whether you know your business or not. And most of them all did. I mean, it was a great career, great people to work with, and great support throughout the whole thing.
So it must have been traumatic for you in some ways to
yes, it was.
Be forced to do or to be forced to stop doing something that you had enjoyed doing for so long.
Well, it is. 7 years of flying in the Air Force where I loved every minute of that, but I knew my career was limited there. And then into Air Canada, which was great. It was tough. The first month after I retired, I had already indicated that I wanted to retire by June, even though I wasn't flying anymore and I was the chief safety officer. Right. I didn't really enjoy working directly for the chief executive officer. The chap that hired me had gone. Right. And so I said, in June, I want to go. Well, they called me in November and said they'd found a replacement. They wanted me to stay on a couple months to train him. And I found out that he worked for me, so I said, well, he doesn't need to be trained. He knows what the job is. And so I left. And we went to Costa Rica for a couple of weeks and had a good holiday with another couple that are good friends. And came back from that, and I said, what the hell am I going to do now? Yeah. I'm 60, I was 61, in good health, and, I'm not one to sit around. I have country property, and there's lots to do there, of course. Sure. But you do get bored doing that, too, after a while. Right. And one of the things I had when I was, and actually before I was hired by the Air Force, I did a bunch of testing. And I also was tested by General Motors to work for them. And everybody said to me, you're a natural salesperson. You should be in sales. And I never looked at it that way. But, to me, it didn't make sense. But I'd always liked real estate. I liked property. And always realized the value of good real estate. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, maybe I'll take a real estate course and see how that works well. I started in January. I got my license in July. I believe it was July. Yes, it was. And in that year, I made over $100,000 in selling and commissions, and less than 6 months or 7 months.
So you were a natural salesman.
Yeah, it turned out I was. And actually, when you're selling real estate, you're not selling real estate. You're selling Allan Alls. Yeah. People have to trust you because you're handling their biggest asset in most cases. Sure. And it's important for them to have faith in what you're doing and selling them. And you try to be as honest as you can and be as forthright with it. It's a tough business. It's the ones that succeed are few. Mm-hmm. I would say, like a lot of sales, 80% of the business people they're there, but they don't do much. Right. 20% do all the work.
80-20.
Yeah, the old 80-20 formula.
Right.
So I enjoyed it. I really did well at it. However, after 9 or 10 years of that, I said, this is a lot of work, and I'm getting, I was, what would I be? I was
10 years older than you were when you started.
Just about to turn 70, and I said, geez, I don't really enjoy working 7 days a week. I am supposed to be retired, but I had three gentlemen took me aside one day and said, we need you to run for mayor. And politics had also been in one of my bucket list, I guess, as I say. I've always liked politics. I've always followed it. Right. I had been the financial guy for the Conservative Riding Association for Michael Chong, who I immensely admire. I also ran Ted Arnott, who's our MPP. I ran his Wellington campaign. And I enjoyed politics and et cetera. So I got into being a mayor and got elected quite handily the first time around, even though I had no municipal experience at all. Right. And I've learned a lot. It's been a great learning experience. And
so you're in your second term now?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I've just finished, or just started, I guess actually finished the first year of the second term, so there's 3 more years to go.
3 more years to go. Okay. Do you consider your current involvement in politics a kind of a variation of previous aspects of your career, or is it something that has kind of a complete rewiring for you.
No, I think it is a bit of a rewiring, but it's also combining skill levels that I learned, right, even going back to the Air Force, but also the Pilots Association, where I had to run meetings. Pretty hard to be a general when you're in amongst a whole lot of generals, and I learned a lot from that. So all these skills in being part of a corporate environment where I didn't mention, but I led the team that put the two airlines, Canadian and Air Canada, together, the operational side of it, not the labor side or the sales marketing side, but the operational side, which we had to do or we couldn't fly together as a cruise anymore. So I did that, and all those skills I brought with me into this job. And but the biggest thing, and I think people lose track of this, but it's not the technical side. It's not the words and et cetera. It's the people side. The people side is so important. And I've had people mad at me, but when I finish talking to them, and I try to get them to come to my office, they're mad. They don't know you're not doing anything for me, and I want to change this. When they see my side of it, they understand. It's the people side. You have to be able to work with people.
How has your involvement both in real estate and in politics in your kind of post-working career, how have those involvements changed your life?
Good question. If you ask my wife, she would say it left her lonely a lot, because it is. Your family does suffer quite a bit in some ways, although we've had some great advantages of being a retired airline. We've traveled a lot. And even this job, I often take her to dinners or meetings where, it's outside. Certainly conventions. She comes with me to Toronto or Ottawa, where we've just been recently. But it has changed my life in the sense that I guess, if you were to ask my two brothers, one you can't ask now, he's passed away, but if you ask my brothers or even my sister maybe, although she's 7 years younger than me, so she probably doesn't remember much, but I was fairly shy. And I don't think I'm shy anymore.
I see.
I'm not afraid to. Just was with a developer who's very wealthy, and quite frank with him. I don't mind talking to him and explaining. He could buy and sell me tomorrow. He's got a lot of money, but that doesn't mean anything to me anymore.
Hard to be shy when you're involved in real estate and politics.
You can't be. You have to be.
You can't be. Al, one of the themes that we're working on in this podcast series is the idea of squeezing all the juice out of retirement. When you hear that phrase, what does that mean to you?
Well, to me it means getting out of bed in the morning and enjoying every hour of the day, being part of something every hour of the day, doing something that makes you alive. It's not the money, because this job doesn't pay much money. Fortunately, I did well with a pension and my sales in real estate. It's not the money. It's getting, feeling that you've got everything and your day hasn't been wasted, that you've spent some time. You've either made some people mad or some people happy. But, I guess, and maybe there's an ego side of it too. I don't know. I think there's part of that, where when you go around, you're Mr. Mayor, and people, they respect that. They respect the position, even if they don't respect you maybe, but they respect the position and understand somewhat what that means.
So if someone were to ask you your advice as to how they could squeeze all the juice out of retirement, what kind of advice would you give?
Find something that you like doing and do it. I speak to high school and public school kids all the time. The teachers ask me to come and talk. And my advice to them is money is important. It's really important, because you can't live a decent quality of life without it. But it isn't a be-all and end-all. Find something you like doing. I watched guys in the airline who did it because of the money. They didn't enjoy it. They actually were either afraid or just didn't like it. Where every minute I was in the air, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. To me, it was just great. And my wife used to say, "You're going to work, stop smiling." And even today, I didn't sleep well last night. We had a long meeting. long council meeting, quite controversial over some issues, and we're dealing with a very heavy agenda right at the moment. And I had this thing today at a meeting at 9:30 to walk a property that a developer's doing. And yet I got to bed thinking, oh, great, I got something there to do. I'm going to enjoy doing that, you know. And even sitting here talking to you, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, great.
You know, that's
great.
important.
Me too. Yeah. Now, you said that a lot of your early life and some of the skills that you learned are still part of your involvement here. So it sounds as though something that you like may well be something that you know you do well and that you've built on in the past. Is that the case for you?
Yes, I think so. Definitely, there's no doubt about it. I know that the staff really respect me. You know, they invite me to everything, and they'll do anything for me.
Right.
You know, within reason, obviously. But you know, they're very good, and because the municipality, as any business, doesn't run on the leaders. The leaders are out front, but it's the background people that are so important, that are making sure it's functioning well, and et cetera. And I'm really pleased with the staff we have here now. That you know, there's been quite a change. But the first rule is look after the resident, make sure he's addressed. He'll be angry maybe, and I tell him, send the angry ones down to me. You know, I'm not afraid to talk to them, and I'd like to try to convince them that what they're saying is not totally accurate or wrong. So yeah.
Another one of the themes that we're developing in this series is this idea of don't retire, rewire. What does that phrase mean to you when you hear it?
Well, it's the same old thing. I mean, you know, you can retire and put your feet up on the porch and watch the grass grow, sit and watch TV all day, or go play cards, or whatever is your thing. Right. I've watched friends of mine that got into drinking because they were bored to death. They didn't know what to do with their life, and they felt insignificant and not wanted or needed anymore. But so to me, take a look at what is out there, see something that's interesting, and do it, and get involved in it. There is so much out there. Exactly. I mean, I wished I could rewind my life and go back, because I'd be more than happy to do something else. I've always thought law would be something I'd enjoy doing, because I enjoy debating, and I thought, well, you know, maybe I should have done that too, you know. But you can't do that. You reach the time. I don't know where I'm going to go when I'm finished. I more or less have indicated that at the end of the next 3 years, I won't run again, because the job's pretty intense, and maybe it's a younger man's job. I don't know. However, I don't know if you know, but a week ago or 2 weeks ago on a Friday morning, I have a mayor's breakfast I run every 6 months. And we had Hazel McCallion, Hurricane Hazel, as our guest speaker. Hazel's just about 99. She's 98 3/4. This lady is something to admire. Whether you agree with everything she says or does doesn't really matter. Right. She is physically active, and her mind is solid. She stood on the stage and spoke for 20 minutes, never missed a beat, and it was very apropos to what we wanted to talk about. Right. And I really enjoyed her. It was fun to listen to her, and you could tell the audience was just wrapped up in what she was saying. There was about 130 people at breakfast. Right. Hard to get people out at 7 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. And I might add, there's a lady who had been at a meeting in Toronto till midnight, and she lives in Mississauga and had to get up to get to my breakfast for 7 o'clock. And you'd never know it. I mean, she was right there. Yeah. We gave her a hockey sweater as a thank you, with Aaron on it and a number and all that stuff, and a really nice hockey sweater. She was just tickled pink. Yeah, just loved it. Quite a character, isn't she? Yeah. Allan, I want to thank you very much for spending your time with us here today, and thank you for your recollections and your insights. And I'm sure people are going to find our conversation of real interest. So thanks very much for being here. Well, thank you, Riley. I enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation, and that you'll join us again next time as we help you squeeze all the juice out of retirement. I'm Riley Moynes. Bye for now.